Why does bureaucracy exist? Well, fill in your W17L3SS continuation forms now to watch the rest of the video. The original definition of bureaucracy is a system of government where important decisions are made by civil servants rather than elected politicians. Bureaucracy, as I'm using it, is the administrative framework of any large body, whether it is a government, a corporation, or an institution. Bureaucracies exist in private and public sectors. Payroll. That's a credit department issue. Bureaucracies rely on regulations and constant feedback from all levels of their hierarchies. Feedback in the form of data, most often through paperwork or the online equivalent of it. That's not my department. Hierarchy is critical to bureaucracy, not necessarily in a hegemonic way, but a compartmentalized one. In a large institution, you can't send a message straight to the boss. It has to go through HR, senior HR, minion relations, droid control, the College of Evil, and then all around the command staff before someone addresses it, or before it's filed away in the incinerator. Although it wasn't necessarily thought of as such, bureaucracy has possibly been around since not long after the existence of writing. Ancient cultures and empires had their bureaucracies, and often they were instrumental in keeping rule, combating corruption, and providing some form of social or economic analysis. The Doomsday Book was created for tax purposes and to identify potentially adversarial powers who owned lots of land. The Romans had their censuses, censi, so they could tell who was where and what was going on. Really, the point of bureaucracy is accountability and organisational functionality, or the overt point of it is. I don't think I will be astounding anyone to say that I do believe some elements of bureaucracy, or even entire bureaucracies, are there to line pockets and look busy. But bureaucracy, in theory, allows the outsider, whether that be the public, the taxman or regulators, to see how decisions are made and who is responsible for those decisions. It also allows the people at the top to see who beneath them is doing what and where problems lie. It's essential in monitoring activity through reporting and ensuring that a system is rational, and that it's not based on traditions or favouritism, or the whims of a Caligula-like figure who, like that emperor, will end up being torn apart by his Praetorian Guard, to favour efficiency and output over cronyism or self-interest. Bureaucracy has been key in curtailing things like institutionalised racism, eliminating inefficiencies and streamlining processes, and issuing fairer systems for the allocation of funds or services, or because it presents inescapable checks and balances. Or that's the theory. Woodrow Wilson argued for the existence of bureaucracy as a system of trained apolitical professionals who would devoutly follow the letter of the system they were in. He was talking about the government and bureaucracy as a critical part of eliminating corruption. If you have to fill in a form saying that you sold it with a receipt from someone saying that they bought it, it's harder to steal. I mean, not impossible. Where there's a will, there's a way. And there is a will. Max Weber, German sociologist, is fundamental in how we understand modern bureaucracy and in the shaping of it. He believed people in organisations should be rewarded for their professional merits and not because they're likeable. He believed in a meritocratic system, but he also knew that to achieve fairness, this system would often utilise depersonalisation. He knew that an efficient, rational bureaucracy would mean that people would be used in a way that best suited the organisation, even if that made them a cog in a machine. He saw the rationalisation behind bureaucracies as perhaps logical, but also as a threat to autonomy, individuality and freedom. And he thought that because bureaucracy offers a logical and fair division of labour, assigning people to tasks based on their skills, and because it offers impartiality when dealing with individuals, that depersonalisation, big government or corporations treating people as statistics, was inevitable. And here we are. American sociologist Robert K. Merton believed that bureaucracies were by nature unwilling to change. And that's because the people behind them, Merton thought, developed an attachment to their preferred routines. He argued that there was a certain arrogance in bureaucracy, and that this arrogance developed through successfully following procedures regardless of circumstance. As the ideal policeman pursues a criminal regardless of who they are or the influence they have, the ideal bureaucrats, Merton thought, were prone to following the rules no matter what, which in turn effectively removed any feeling of personal responsibility they might have. One of the many reasons bureaucracy is so often ridiculed is because companies such as Facebook or Apple, and many others, clearly utilize bureaucracy to avoid tax. And they do so legally. Something I think the majority of people would probably agree may be legal, but is morally wrong. But bureaucracies don't think in wishy-washy terms such as morality, just the rules they're programmed with. Just the way that law isn't intended to make moral judgments, neither is bureaucracy. Because of this, they can't adapt, and you end up needing Senate or parliamentary interference to close loopholes that pretty obviously were oversights and not intended to facilitate a corporation earning billions of dollars and paying a few million in tax. Because I don't want peas. Because I don't want peas in my bolognese. Because it's a crime against humanity, Jumbo. The bureaucracy of big business doesn't need AI because it's always tried to train people into being robots. Not literally automatons, but merely functions. Bureaucracy is implemented as if it were a circuit board. It's all about receiving information and implementing decisions as fast as possible, but humans run the show. They're both the command prompts and the electrons. But they become, Weber argues, so involved in this system that although often alienated, they turn into small cogs aspiring to be big cogs. Take a look at this article. It's about a man who built some wooden stairs in his local park because, well, I guess the council weren't doing it. Now the stairs do look lovely, but who's responsible if they collapse and someone dies? I think it's a very nice thing that this man did, but I don't think it's unreasonable for the council to cordon it off as they have. Even if this didn't present a liability problem, the council can't just let people put up street furniture as they like. What happens if someone sees this and they take it upon themselves to make some speed bumps out of bits of old patio and glue? This is a petty example, but I think it sums up well what bureaucracy is. It seemingly goes against common sense, but it does have logical reasons behind it, but also it's completely heartless. Dysfunction is, however, a key trait of bureaucracy, or at least human-led bureaucracy. I mean, AM isn't going to be requesting any tardiness forms. And that government department probably could just do the thing that you want them to do. The official probably even agrees with you, but if they helped you on the sly and didn't follow procedure, they undermine the whole process, and the next thing you know, it's Mogadishu on a Friday night. Or at least a bit of backpedaling. I think the thing is if we still lived in a village of 200 people, or even 1,000 people, that guy could put up those stairs and it would be fine. It would be celebrated. If you work in a company of 20 or 30 people, you can just knock on the door of the boss and say, "Hey Bertrand, we have a problem," or you can ask for time off if there's a family emergency and not have to fill in a form. The critical thing to realise, and the thing that most academics who talk about it say, is that bureaucracy can have its place, it can be useful, but also that it is incredibly dangerous if it is overextended, or becomes people's default for dealing with problems rather than, their actual problem-solving ability. But the thing is, of course, the line between necessary and overextended bureaucracy is hard to establish. Should paramedics have to fill in some sort of form if they see somebody hurt themselves? Probably yes. Should they have to fill out a 25-page form whenever they have to restrain someone because the hospital authority is scared of being sued later and wants protection? Well, no, that seems to be taking them away from their actual job, but there is a reason why that 25-page form exists. Of course, while there are often reasons behind bureaucratic processes, often I think the real reasons are veiled. I think bureaucracy is often used to put people off. I mean, have you ever tried getting a refund on a train ticket because of massive delays stemming from systemic lack of investment? Which brings me to Britain, one of the most bureaucratic countries in the world, but not the most inefficient, I would guess. Try building a tree house in a garden. It could be a privacy violation. It almost certainly would be a health and safety violation. And it could also be a planning permission violation. Maybe that only kicks in when you start to double glaze the windows. Britain, is now the opposite of the laissez-faire state it once was. And that's because the state now has a powerful bureaucracy so they can work out how much garbage you're not recycling and how many years you should wait for a bullet in the back of the head on the NHS. Bit negative. Some of the policemen are very jolly. But the many rules in Britain and beyond are there as responses, and sometimes those responses are necessary. Sorry, you can't use asbestos for roofing anymore, it causes cancer. What's that? You want to volunteer as an adult instructor for the cadets? Well, please fill out these forms first, telling us how much of a paedophile you are. We're now all subject to very stringent and bureaucratic checks when it comes to air travel. And although very inconvenient, I think that those checks are a valid response, even if they're wide open to Jedi mind tricks. I'm on drugs. No, wait. I think the reason people are so against bureaucracy, the reason the word itself is used negatively almost exclusively, is because it's never as efficient as it should be. Often it's just tedious redoing of the same unnecessary procedures. In India, I met 2 Chinese secret policemen. That's how they introduced themselves. And they were very impressed with the Indian Railway because they didn't need to buy their tickets weeks in advance and they didn't need special permission to go along certain routes. I have no recollection of any other conversations that we may or may not have had. Bureaucracies can be used as a tool of oppression because huge amounts of paperwork can be intimidating, but more than that, as I said, bureaucracy alleviates feelings of personal responsibility. It's easy to forget that you're dealing with people when all you see of them are their information on pieces of paper or on the screen. Until an artificial intelligence can look at the whole picture all at once, bureaucracies will continue to be, at some level, dysfunctional, inflexible, and open to be used for nefarious ends. I've read a lot about ideas about making democratic, autonomous companies that aren't bureaucratic at all, that have no hierarchy and that make decisions on strategy from collective knowledge, or that extensively use open task allocation. And I think when these ideas are implemented, there is still a need for a system for accounting actions, and certainly a system for accounting income and expenditure. Even in the most trendy, I'm not your boss sort of companies, forms still need to be filled out. Data still needs to be collected, and even if that's automatic, that's still a form of bureaucracy. However, these companies are small villages, or in W. L. Gore's case, a large village of highly skilled workers. Where alternatives to bureaucracy have flourished, I say good for you, but it's not the same as organising McDonald's or the military. My own personal view is that bureaucracy isn't responsible for its reputation as much as the implementation of bureaucracy is, and that implementation is responsible for much of the fatalism and apathy in modern society, because we're all just small cogs. Well, that's it for this episode. Thank you very much for watching. I know that you have probably had an experience with the ridiculous end of bureaucracy, and I'd love to hear about that in the comments. Like, comment and subscribe, but if you do comment, make sure that you like first, otherwise you'll have to recalculate the entire quarter. Next time, I'll be talking about online dating. So, see you then.